We're here in Haweswater with Lee Schofield, author and ecologist, and we're staring at Harter Fell. Now, Lee, forgive my ignorance, I would normally just look at that and go, oh, crag, but what am I missing?
So this is such a special crag. So for a plant nerd like me, this is heaven. Like, ratcheting around in these cliffs and crags is just sublime. So it's really difficult to get into. The crags are really crumbly, not a place that you'd recommend anybody going and climbing. And partly because of that crumbliness, it's incredibly rich for alpine plants. So for anybody who's been to the Alps or the Picos, you know, you quite often see these huge expanses of like incredibly diverse plant life, like, you know, millions of flowers as far as the eye can see, buzzing with insects.
I'm sort of imagining Sound of Music.
Exactly that. Yeah,
Clouds of
Edelweiss,
butterflies.
all
Yeah,
of that.
okay,
yeah,
right,
all
yeah.
of that. And you know, it's incredible. And we don't have that anymore. What we have are these tiny little pockets of the same habitat that are sort of sandwiched onto tiny, narrow little cliff ledges. And the reason that they're there is not because that's where they want to grow. It's just because we've had such high levels of grazing by both sheep and wild deer for a really long period of time that they've basically been kind of eliminated from the wider landscape. So these are the places that they've managed to cling on.
So this is the little refuge that the sheep and the deer can't get to.
Yeah.
And that's why the plants survive there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And so we've created this sort of fenced exclosure that we're standing in the middle of now to give those plants more space. So an
exclosure being the opposite of an enclosure.
Yeah,
so
we're
you're keeping the sheep and deer out. Right,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And we've seen just amazing recovery of that alpine plant community, sort of particularly where we're standing. So, you know, down here we've got some alpine lady's mantle. It's a different species of lady's mantle there.
Okay.
And we've got amazing numbers of rowan trees that have just fallen off this tree behind us, and, you know, are getting the first chance they've had in probably hundreds of years just to turn into actual trees. So the brilliant thing about this crag as well is it teaches us a lot about how landscapes function and how dynamic nature is. So we're very used to thinking of landscapes, particularly big upland landscapes like this, as being quite fixed. You know, they don't tend to change very quickly. So we see them as being the same in our childhood as we do sort of 30 or 40 years later, whatever. But actually there are these natural processes going on all the time. And up on these cliffs and crags, you've got a fantastic example whereby the vegetation sort of builds up, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker, and then eventually it gets kind of washed off and it resets the cliff back to sort of bare rock again. And you've got that process happening at different timescales, like all the way through the crag. So you've got some bare ground here, and that really benefits the really small ruderal species. And then the thicker, kind of more vegetated crags are really good for the things like the great wood rush and some of the trees to grow. And every now and again, you get like a really big rainfall event, and a great big rockfall comes down, and it creates a vast swathe of new seedbed, and that's basically what we've got just down here. And that allows a whole suite of plants to grow that wouldn't have the chance to compete in the sort of the grass dominated habitat that you can see just beyond.
The idea of there being like soil slips and erosion on the cliffs and rock falls from heavy rain, in my mind, I think without you explaining that that's part of the natural process, I'd be like, oh no, that's bad.
You think that's bad?
That's like damage to the natural environment.
Not at all. Not at all. Rivers help to make that process even clearer. So where you have a river that naturally kind of erodes and meanders and moves, you've got new habitat being formed all the time. Most of our rivers have been embanked. They've been sort of pinned into a set route, and they can't access the deposits of gravel in the soil, and they can't move to the lowest part of the valley, and sometimes they even end up sort of perched above the level of the surrounding floodplain. And when you set a river free again, like we did in Swindale, all of those natural processes come, and every time you visit that river, it's different. It's a new river every single time. It's like a living thing that's back in the landscape again. And we need to be reminded of that. We need to be reminded of the dynamism that nature wants to be kind of operating within. And you know, this is a kind of place where you really can kind of understand that.